Hi, welcome back to Faith and Conviction. I'm your host, Ray Harris. I want to welcome you to this week's Torah portion, and we are looking at Torah portion 22. Again, this comes from the book of Shemot, otherwise known in English as Names, but commonly referred to as the book of Exodus. And we're going to be looking at verses 35, chapter 35, verse 1, down through chapter 38, verse 20. The key word has been our study and our focus the entire portions as we going through it this year in its rotation. And the key word is Vayak'hel. Now, what's interesting about that is when it gets translated into the Greek Old Testament and then gets understood into the English, and has a very important connection into the New Testament, which I want us to see this time, and may pose a little bit of a challenge, but that's a good thing. So, there's an interesting thing that goes with this week's Torah portion. Torah portion 22 and 23 are together, and this is because we are in a non-leap year. So we're going to cover two portions, but not in this video. So look at the next video for Torah portion 23. I think you'll be rewarded with that and will enjoy it. But this time we're going to look at this Torah portion. And it is, again, Vayak'hel. And Strong's number is H6950. And that's kahal, if I pronounce it correctly. Brown Driver Briggs tells us it means one of two things: either to assemble or to gather. So we assemble something, we gather something together. Now the E-sword has that this is 38 times in the Hebrew within the Old Testament. So, but it's only used one time in our Torah portion, which kind of is nice for a change to have just one word found in our Torah portion, so we can really focus on it and see what's going on. So look at chapter 35, verse 1. The King James has it this way: "And Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel." The Complete Jewish Bible says, Moshe assembled the whole community of the people of Israel. The Jewish Publication Society, this one here, uses a different word, but I like it, and it says, Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community. And it carries a little bit different meaning with that. Now, I've been talking about this Bible here many times, and this is the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, and it's used as a resource for me when I'm studying. So I want to use it again this week, and I want to show something with it, and I think this will prove why we need to be careful with the words that we choose. The Apostolic Bible Polyglot says, "And Moses gathered together all the congregation of the sons of Israel." Now, as our habit is, we want to go to the Greek Old Testament, which is what the Apostolic Bible Polyglot has, and then take those Greek words, see what they're doing in the New Testament, and see how the English is helping us. So the Apostolic Bible Polyglot, the Greek Old Testament, translates Exodus 35 verse 1 in part as using the word sine throisen for gathering the people together. And that's Greek number 4867. Now, I don't want to point it out just yet, but this word is very important, and we want to go look at this in the New Testament. So the Strong's number on that Greek word is G4867. G4867. And it's suna throiso. Suna throiso. Now that means to gather together with others, to assemble, to be gathered together. That's what there helps us understand. In the New Testament, it's only found 3 times. It's in Luke 24, verse 33. The King James says, "And they rose up the same hour and returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 gathered together." That's the same word, the same Greek word that we found over here in Exodus 35, verse 1. Now they are the men from the road to Emmaus. That's a very important element in Luke about Jesus and his revelation about who he is. But look over in Acts chapter 12 and verse 12. Chapter 12, verse 12. The King James says, "And when he," now that he is Peter, because you can go back to verse 11 in chapter 12 and find that. "When Peter had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying." So again, gathered together, what sits behind that is that Greek word, suna throidzo. Okay, so that's important. Acts 19 and verse 25. "Whom he," Demetrius, that's known because of verse 24, "called together with the workmen of like occupation." So there's actually something going on in Ephesus at that point, and he's kind of putting together, I guess, what we might call a riot or a protest. But anyway, what he's going to do is he calls together an assembly. And This is very important. And what Greek word sits behind that is sunathroidzo. Now, we look at these things and we go, what does it mean? How does this mean anything? Well, I want us to go back to our key verse for our key word for our Torah portion, Exodus 35, verse 1. Let us hear that in the Greek. Kai, sunathroidzin, mausis, pasan, sunagogain, huion rather, Israel. There's two words that are alike in there. One is a verb and one is a noun. Sunathroisin is the Greek word we just looked at. The sunagogain is the noun version of that. Now you might have heard something in there that's very similar to something that you might have heard before. But synagogain is where we get the word English synagogue. And we know when we read the New Testament that the word synagogue is found in lots of places. In fact, when I was doing this look, it says that synagogain is found in the New Testament 58 times. Only 2 of those times is it not translated as synagogue. So this gets into the idea of translation versus transliteration. And when you take synagogain and you take it into the English as synagogue, that's called a transliteration. Now, if you want to translate it, synagogain means an assembled group, a gathering together. And that's fine, that both are accurate. But when we do our word choices, it flavors how we interpret the text and why we understand it the way we do. So there's only 2 instances where synagogain is not understood as a synagogue. That is found in James chapter 2 verse 2 and Acts 13 and verse 43. So let's look at Acts 13:43 first, because I just want to point out that without having to turn there, it's very important that you can go back up to chapter 13 verse 42 and see that it's the exact same synagogue that happens to be released as a congregation in verse 43. Now the King James doesn't help us much like that, because it's like, okay, we got a synagogue in verse 42, we go to a congregation in verse 43, is this the same people? Yes, it is. But if the word synagogain is behind each one, why are we not using the same word to translate it? Translators have their preferences and their choices, and they look at context and things of that nature. I disagree with how they translate it. I think they should have had synagogue in both of these translations. Now you go over to the Complete Jewish Bible, which is a New Testament. It's a Messianic believing Jew who translates it. He uses synagogue in both of those verses because that's what the Greek has. He's being consistent. Now, I want us to go over here to James chapter 2, verse 2. The King James is talking about it in the translation. For if they come into your assembly. Now that's a fine thing. But what's happened behind the word assembly is synagogain. How we would get the Greek word synagogue, or the English word synagogue, the transliteration. Now, why would we not find the word synagogue there? Because technically James is writing to believers in Jesus who are an assembled and a called out group. Yes, I understand that. Contextually, they are believers in Jesus. But that is not what the Greek has been translated or transliterated as in the rest of the New Testament. It is synagogue. Now this flavors the way we understand James. Now James is understood to be written by James the Just, brother of Jesus, who helped lead the church in Jerusalem. He is not writing to the church. He is writing to a synagogue of believers who are Jews who believe in Jesus. Now, what do you do when what sits behind that English word is synagogain? You want to be fair to the text. You translate it the way you do everything else. Now see, this is why I like the Apostolic Bible Polyglot. Because he sets himself to a much higher standard, and I think I do the same. And I like to try and be consistent as much as I know how. And I think he does as well. And he says, with an interlinear Bible, you really don't have a lot of freedom, because the Greek word is staying right there with the English word, and you can make a critical assessment of it. So he says the translator is held to a higher standard, as he must use English words which reflect the meaning of the original Greek word. The meaning is assembly. That's fine. But that's not how the rest of the word synagogain is translated in the New Testament. It's transliterated as synagogue. So, he says here, continuing, any other English word would be suspect and easily refuted. And he is correct. So when we come over here into this, and we're looking at this Torah portion, and we're seeing how it connects over into the New Testament, it is very powerful to see that the English does not stay consistent with this translation. And unfortunately, I am going to take issue, because I do think that the Apostolic Bible Polyglot should have not translated as gathering in James 2:2, but as synagogue, because that's the way it is in the Greek. But at least he has the Greek word above it, and that allows you to see the influence. Now, what I want us to understand one more thing is the Greek Old Testament was translated by Jews who knew Greek, and the word synagogue comes from the Greek. Now, we have synagogue all throughout the English New Testament, but it comes from the Greek. And in the Greek New Testament, we have, again, Jews like Paul who could speak Greek, and they would have people. Paul uses a secretary of sorts to help him write the New Testament and to write these epistles. These men knew Greek as well. They use the word synagogue, and they use it for a reason. And we've been transliterating it as synagogue, except for these two instances. I want us to consider that when we change these two instances, it flavors our understanding and changes our understanding, because we're not seeing the Greek. And what we've been doing this whole series is going from the Hebrew of Moses to the Greek Old Testament to the Greek New Testament, so we can see the English, because we need to see how all of these things connect. And this is actually very, very important, so we can understand the power of Moses and the power of Messiah, so we can understand the apostolic writers like James, who is a disciple of Jesus, so we can understand who he is and what he is saying and why he's saying what he's saying. These are powerful, and these are relevant issues that we need to discuss and see about the translations. So I hope it's been an encouragement. Until next time, continue to seek God, know Messiah, find hope.